The first sign of the season's change is not the wind, but a sudden heavy stillness that settles over the high mountain passes, a silence so profound it seems to press against your ears like the weight of a heavy wool blanket. You pull your sheepskin cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the coarse, oily lanolin scent of the wool mingling with the crisp, metallic bite of the coming frost. The sky above the Tian Shan mountains has turned the color of bruised iron, a deep slate grey that swallows the jagged peaks of the celestial range. You look up, squinting against the thin air, and see the first flake. A single, fat crystal of white that zigzags through the air before vanishing against the dark, calloused skin of your hand. You are An Lushan, a merchant of Sogdiana, and your world is measured in the slow, rhythmic swaying of a camel's gait and the clinking of silver coins tucked deep within your sash. Behind you, the caravan stretches out like a long, dusty ribbon, a line of 2 humped Bactrian camels laden with the treasures of the East, bundles of raw silk wrapped in protective oiled skins, small ceramic jars filled with pungent cloves and star anise, and heavy crates of polished lapis lazuli. The animals sense the shift in the atmosphere before you do. They groan low in their throats, their breath blooming in white clouds that dissipate in the freezing air. You can hear the rhythmic, muffled chime of the copper bells hanging from their necks. Clink-tonk, clink-tonk. A sound that has been the heartbeat of your life for 20 years, now softened by the accumulating powder beneath their wide, splayed feet. The path beneath you is narrow, a winding thread of stone and frozen earth that clings to the side of the massif. As you walk, you feel the dull, familiar ache in your lower back, a souvenir of 1,000 miles spent in the saddle or walking alongside your lead bull. Your leather boots, lined with felt, crunch rhythmically against the hardening ground. You focus on that sound, letting it ground you as the world around you begins to blur into a haze of white. The geography of the Silk Road in this 8th century is a map of endurance, a vast network of arteries connecting the bustling markets of Chang'an to the grand plazas of Samarkand, and you are currently navigating one of its most treacherous valves. As the snow begins to fall in earnest, swirling in dizzying patterns that obscure the trail ahead, you look toward the horizon, searching for a sign of sanctuary, and then, through the veil of white, you see it. The looming, rectangular shadow of the caravanserai. Its high stone walls rise out of the tundra like a fortress, a promise of safety against the predatory cold of the high steppe. The sight brings a slow, weary relief to your chest. You know that within those walls there is fire, there is the scent of roasting mutton, and there is the heavy, dreamless sleep that only comes to a man who has outrun a winter storm. It is a beautiful thing to find a moment of peace at the end of a long day, and as you prepare to enter the gates, perhaps you are finding your own sense of stillness right now. If you are settling in for the night and finding comfort in these echoes of the past, you are in the right place. Here at the Slumber Archives, we share new history narrations just like this one every single day, so if you find this journey relaxing, consider subscribing so you never miss a night's story. A simple like on the video helps others discover these quiet corners of history too. Now, let us return to the mountain pass, where the snow is beginning to pile high against the stones. The final push toward the gates is the hardest. The wind begins to moan through the crags of the Tian Shan, a haunting, low-frequency whistle that seems to vibrate in your very bones. You lead your camel by the nose ring, feeling the creature's warmth radiating against your side, a living furnace in the middle of the ice. The smell of the caravan changes as you approach the walls. the scent of the wild, open mountain air is replaced by the comforting, domestic aroma of wood smoke and dried animal dung burning in hearths. It clings to your hair and your beard, a perfume of civilization that signals the end of your labor for the season. You reach the heavy timber doors of the caravanserai, which groan open on massive iron hinges to welcome the exhausted line of men and beasts. As you step inside the courtyard, the wind is suddenly cut off, replaced by an echoing chamber of sound. The shouting of grooms, the splashing of water into stone troughs, and the heavy thud of packs being heaved from tired backs. You stand for a moment, just breathing, feeling the sudden weight of your own exhaustion. The stone floor beneath your feet is cold, but it is solid, and it does not move. The Tian Shan Mountains are now hidden behind the thick masonry, a wall of white and granite that you have successfully navigated once more. You run a hand over the rough surface of a nearby pillar, feeling the grit of ancient dust and the smooth patches where thousands of merchants before you have leaned their weary frames. This place, this stone island in a sea of snow, is a crossroads of the world. Here in the 8th century, the languages of a dozen kingdoms mingle in the air like the steam from the tea kettles. You are home, at least for the winter, within these 4 walls. The long trek from the borders of China has ended, and as the snow piles up against the outer gates, sealing the world away, you realize that there is nowhere else you need to be. The light is fading fast now, turning the courtyard into a space of deep blues and flickering orange firelight. You watch your men begin to unload the silk, the precious cargo that represents years of planning and months of peril. Each bale is a heavy, tangible weight, and as it is stacked in the dry storage rooms, you feel a corresponding lightness in your own spirit. The winter will be long, and the mountain passes will soon be impassable, choked with drifts that could swallow a man whole. But you are inside, you are safe, and as you turn toward the warmth of the common room, the sound of the muffled camel bells fades into the background, replaced by the slow, steady rhythm of your own heart, finally finding its rest. The sound of the world outside begins to change long before the heavy iron-studded wooden gates have even finished their slow, agonizing swing. It is a sound of metal grinding against stone, a deep and resonant groan that vibrates through the soles of your boots, announcing to the frozen mountain pass that a temporary sanctuary has been granted. You watch as the massive timbers, weathered by decades of grit and ice, finally yield to the pressure of the gatekeeper's shoulders. As the gap widens, the wind gives one final desperate howl, whipping the edges of your heavy wool cloak and stinging your cheeks with a spray of crystalline snow before you step across the threshold and leave the wilderness behind. The transition is almost physical, a sudden and profound shift in the very quality of the air you breathe. One moment, the atmosphere is thin and sharp, tasting of nothing but cold and distance. The next, you are enveloped by the sheltered, smoky warmth of the caravanserai's inner courtyard. The air here is thick and heavy, a complex tapestry of scents that tells the story of every traveller who has sought refuge within these walls. There is the pungent, earthy musk of the camels, their shaggy coats damp with melted frost, and the sharp, acidic tang of wood smoke rising from a dozen small hearths. You feel the tension that has been coiled in your shoulders for weeks begin to loosen, just a fraction, as the silence of the courtyard, a quiet punctuated only by the low grunts of livestock and the distant clatter of copper pots, replaces the relentless roar of the gale. Your boots crunch softly on the packed earth as you lead your lead camel toward the unloading stalls. Your movements are slow and deliberate, hampered by the layers of felt and fur that have protected you from the elements, but also by a deep-seated exhaustion that seems to have settled into your very marrow. There is a specific rhythm to this work, a ritual of arrival that you have performed in 100 different cities, from Samarkand to the borders of the Middle Kingdom. You reach up, your fingers stiff and clumsy within your gloves, to begin unfastening the thick leather straps that secure the cargo. These are not merely goods. They are the physical manifestation of months of peril, the reason you have braved the heights of the Pamirs and the loneliness of the high plateaus. As the first bale of raw silk is lowered from the camel's back, you feel its surprising density. Even wrapped in protective layers of oiled hide and coarse hemp, the silk carries a certain weight, a gravity born of its immense value. You think of the thousands of delicate cocoons that were unraveled to create this mass, the shimmering threads that will eventually find their way into the robes of kings or the hangings of a distant temple. Beside it, you stack the smaller, more carefully padded crates containing the colored glass, cobalt blues and deep emerald greens that catch the flickering light of the courtyard torches, glowing like embers from within their straw bedding. And then, the most precious of all, the small, wax-sealed jars of musk. Even through the clay and the wrappings, a faint, sweet, and animal scent lingers, a reminder of the vast distances this substance has travelled to reach this high, lonely stone fortress. While your assistants move the cargo into the dry storage rooms, cool, dark chambers where the mountain air keeps the moisture at bay, you turn to see a figure approaching through the haze of smoke. It is the innkeeper, a man whose face is as lined and weathered as the mountains themselves, his eyes hooded by years of squinting against the sun and the snow. He moves with a quiet efficiency, his own heavy robes swaying as he nears you. There is no need for grand gestures or loud proclamations here. In the world of the Silk Road, a successful arrival is a sacred thing, understood through small nods and the shared silence of survivors. "The passes are closing early this year," he says, his voice a low rasp that seems to come from deep within his chest. You offer a small, tired smile in return, the skin of your face feeling tight and wind-burned. You exchange the traditional greetings of the Sogdian merchants, a blend of formal well-wishing and the practical inquiries of men who live by the movement of goods and the shifting of seasons. He asks after the health of your animals and the state of the road behind you, and you answer in short, measured sentences, your breath blooming in white clouds before your face. The innkeeper's presence is grounding. He is the guardian of this small island of civilization in a sea of stone, the one who ensures the fires stay lit and the water remains unfrozen. As you speak, you become hyper-aware of your own body, the ache in your lower back, where you have leaned into the wind for hours on end, begins to throb with a dull, rhythmic heat. Your feet, though no longer numb, feel heavy and distant, as if they still belong to the frozen path outside. You notice the way the wood smoke clings to your hair and the fibers of your cloak, a smell that signifies home, even if home is just a temporary room with a straw pallet and a single candle. The courtyard around you is a hive of quiet activity. Other merchants are tending to their own fires, the low murmur of their voices in various dialects creating a soothing, incomprehensible hum that lulls the senses. You watch the innkeeper's hands as he gestures toward the common room, large calloused hands that have handled the coins of a dozen different empires. He promises a pot of hot tea brewed with salt and yak butter and a bowl of thick barley stew. The thought of the warmth spreading through your chest is almost overwhelming. You take one last look at your stacked cargo, ensuring the seals are intact and the covers are pulled tight against the drifting soot of the fires. The silk, the glass, and the musk are safe now, tucked away in the belly of the stone structure, protected by thick walls that have stood for centuries against the weight of the winter. There is a profound sense of closure in this moment, the ending of one chapter and the slow, quiet beginning of another. The journey is paused. The struggle against the mountain has been won, at least for today.
As you turn to follow the innkeeper toward the flickering orange light of the doorway, you feel the heavy iron gates being barred behind you. The sound of the bolts sliding into place is a final, definitive click, a signal to your mind and body that the watch is over. The howling wilderness is now just a memory on the other side of the stone, and the only thing that matters is the path of a few short steps toward the fire, the steam of the tea, and the long, dreamless sleep that awaits you in the shadows of the caravanserai. The interior of the common room is a cavern of soft light and long shadows. The walls are built of massive, unhewn stones, their surfaces darkened by the soot of 1,000 winters. You find a spot near the hearth, sinking onto a low wooden bench that has been polished smooth by the passage of countless weary travellers. The wood is warm beneath you, a gentle heat that seems to seep through your trousers and into your tired muscles. You unbuckle your sword belt and lay it aside, the weight of the steel leaving a strange void against your hip. Here you are not a traveller, not a merchant, not a protector of riches. You are simply a man seeking the basic comforts of heat and rest. You watch the flames dance in the hearth, their colours shifting from deep crimson to a pale dancing gold. The wood crackles softly, a sharp rhythmic sound that punctuates the low drone of conversation around you. The air is thick and nourishing, smelling of roasted grains and the sweet, resinous scent of the cedar logs burning in the grate. You feel your eyelids growing heavy, the flickering light creating patterns behind your closed eyes. The world outside, the ice-choked rivers, the narrow ledges, the biting wind, feels like a dream, a story told by someone else in a different lifetime. You are here, in the heart of the mountain, wrapped in the safety of stone and fire as the long winter begins its slow and silent descent.
The structure that holds you tonight is not merely a building, but a fortress of hospitality, a square stone anchor dropped into a sea of shifting snow. You let your gaze wander upward, tracing the elegant, rhythmic curve of the vaulted ceilings. These arches, crafted from sun-dried brick and local shale, meet in a series of gentle peaks that seem to pull the heavy silence of the mountain upward, away from your tired shoulders. There is a profound sense of weight here, a thickness to the architecture that speaks of centuries of defense against the elements. The walls are not thin partitions, but massive embankments of earth and stone, several feet deep, designed to trap the warmth of the day's fires and hold it close, like a secret kept against the freezing dark. You shift your weight on the thick felt rugs, feeling the subtle textures of the weave beneath your palms. The layout of this caravanserai is a masterpiece of ancient geometry, a perfect square oriented to the four corners of the world. At its heart lies the central courtyard, a vast open space where, during the warmer months, the air would be thick with the braying of camels and the sharp, metallic tang of iron-shod hooves on cobblestone. But now, in the deep midwinter, the courtyard is a well of blue moonlight and drifted snow, a silent void around which the life of the inn revolves. You are tucked away in one of the many vaulted alcoves that line the perimeter, a series of interconnected chambers that offer a sanctuary for both man and beast. Behind the heavy wooden doors that lead off the main corridor, you can hear the muffled, rhythmic breathing of the pack animals. The stables are integrated into the very bones of the building, their warmth rising through the floorboards and mingling with the scent of dry straw. It is a symbiotic existence. The heat of the livestock serves as a natural furnace, softening the sharp edge of the frost that claws at the exterior masonry. You find comfort in this proximity, the knowledge that just a few yards away, the sturdy Bactrian camels are resting, their long necks tucked against their humps, waiting out the storm with the same quiet patience that you must now adopt. As you look around your small alcove, you notice how the light from the central hearth behaves. The fire is situated in a sunken pit in the middle of the common room, and its glow does not reach every corner. Instead, it casts long dancing shadows that play across the soot-stained curves of the ceiling. The shadows move like slow-motion ghosts, stretching and shrinking as the cedar logs settle in the embers. The walls themselves seem to breathe in this light. Because they are finished with a smooth layer of loess plaster, they catch the amber radiance, turning the cold stone into something that looks almost soft, almost like skin. You trace the outline of a small niche carved into the wall beside you, a tiny shelf just large enough for a clay lamp or a traveller's talisman. The edges of the niche are rounded, worn smooth by the touch of countless hands that have rested here before yours. There is a deep, resonant silence in the way the mud brick absorbs sound. Outside, the wind may be howling through the high passes, shrieking against the jagged peaks of the Pamirs, but inside these walls the sound is transformed into a low, distant hum, no louder than the purr of a sleeping cat. The insulation is absolute. The biting Central Asian frost, which can crack a river's ice with a sound like a thunderclap, finds no purchase here. The thick walls act as a thermal reservoir, a silent guardian that stands between your fragile warmth and the predatory cold of the high altitude. And so, you find yourself observing the architecture not as a guest, but as a passenger within a great earthen ship. The arched alcoves, known as iwans, serve as private theatres for the night's quiet reflections. Each archway acts as a frame, capturing a different slice of the interior world. A merchant from Khotan adjusting his silk robe, a groom sharing a final crust of bread with a weary horse, or the innkeeper moving silently to add another branch to the fire. The repetition of these arches creates a sense of infinite order, a rhythmic heartbeat of stone that calms the frantic energy of the day's journey. You notice the way the floor is slightly elevated in the sleeping quarters, a deliberate design to keep the dampness of the earth away from your body. The stones beneath the rugs have been warmed by the hearth all evening, and that heat now seeps upward through the layers of wool and felt into your aching muscles. It is a slow, penetrating heat, the kind that undoes the knots in your lower back and coaxes the tension from your calves. You feel the weight of your own limbs, heavy and settled, as if you are becoming part of the building itself, a temporary fixture in a structure built to outlast dynasties. The placement of the hearths is strategic, located at the intersections of the main halls to ensure that the convective currents of air carry the warmth into every nook. The smoke rises towards small circular vents in the ceiling, tiny eyes looking up at the winter stars, creating a gentle upward draft that keeps the air from becoming stagnant. You watch a single ribbon of smoke as it spirals toward the vent, silvered by a stray beam of moonlight that has managed to pierce the gloom. It is a mesmerizing sight, a slow-motion dance of grey and white that lulls your mind into a state of soft abstraction. Meanwhile, the shadows in the arched alcoves continue their slow, flickering work. They obscure the cracks in the masonry and soften the jagged edges of the crates stacked in the corners. In this half-light, the caravanserai feels less like a commercial hub and more like a temple, a place of pilgrimage where the only deity is the fire and the only prayer is for a safe passage when the spring finally arrives. You wrap your heavy wool cloak tighter around your chest, feeling the coarse fibers against your chin, and let your head rest against the cool, solid surface of the wall. The contrast between the interior and the exterior is the true luxury of this place. You think of the mountain passes you traversed only hours ago, the narrow, treacherous ledges where a single misstep meant a fall into an endless white abyss. You remember the way the wind felt like a physical weight, pushing against your chest, trying to steal the very breath from your lungs. But here, within the embrace of the square stone structure, the wind is just a story. The frost is just a memory. The vaulted ceilings don't just hold up the roof. They hold back the world. As the night deepens, the flickering shadows begin to merge, the fire burning down to a steady, rhythmic pulse of deep orange coals. The architecture seems to pull closer around you, the walls growing taller and more protective in the gathering dark. You are safe. You are warm. The long winter, with all its fury and its silence, remains outside, unable to breach the thick mud brick boundaries of your refuge. You close your eyes, and the image of the vaulted arches remains burned into your mind's eye, a series of protective gates leading you down into the quiet, dark valleys of sleep. The smell of the wool in your heavy felt coat is the smell of home, a scent that lingers even here, hundreds of miles from the turquoise domes of Samarkand. It is a deep, earthy aroma, softened by the oils of the sheep and the faint, persistent ghost of sandalwood incense that has settled into the fibers over months of travel. As you shift your weight against the smooth, cool stone of the wall, you feel the familiar texture of your clothing, the thick, multi-layered tunic, the sturdy leather of your boots that have crossed the Pamir Mountains, and the weight of your pointed felt cap, which you have finally set aside for the evening. You are a child of the Sogdian heartland, born to a lineage of men and women who look at a map not as a series of borders, but as a web of conversations. Your tongue is naturally attuned to the shifting cadences of the world. You speak the elegant, flowing Sogdian of the courts, but you also carry the harsh, guttural sounds of the northern steppes and the precise tonal melodies of the east within your throat. To be Sogdian is to be a bridge. You are the breath that carries news from the jade markets of Chang'an to the glass blowers of Byzantium, and as you sit in the dim light of the caravanserai, you realize that your very identity is woven from these disparate threads. You are not merely a merchant. You are a keeper of stories, a translator of needs, and a silent witness to the slow, grinding movement of history beneath the hooves of your camels. The memory of Samarkand remains vivid in your mind's eye, a city of orchards and rushing water, where the air always feels crisp and charged with the energy of 1,000 languages. You can almost feel the spray of the Zarafshan River against your skin, a coolness that stands in stark contrast to the dry, recycled air of this desert refuge. In Samarkand, the walls are painted with scenes of hunts and banquets, vibrant blues and ochres that celebrate the joy of existence, and even here, in the middle of a frozen wasteland, you carry that vibrancy within you. It is a heritage of resilience. Your people have turned the harsh geography of Central Asia into a garden of commerce, finding pathways through the shifting sands and the treacherous mountain passes where others saw only death. You lean your head back, feeling the slow, rhythmic thrum of your own heartbeat, and you find comfort in the knowledge that you are part of a long, unbroken chain of travelers who have sought the horizon and found it welcoming. In the quiet of the room, you reach for a small pouch tucked into the folds of your belt. Inside is a handful of dried fruit and a small silver amulet, worn smooth by years of touch. Before the night fully claims your senses, you perform the small private rituals of your faith. You are a follower of the good religion, a child of Zarathustra, and to you the world is a constant balance between light and shadow, between the creative spark and the creeping cold. You do not need a great temple or a roaring altar to find your center. A single flame is enough. You watch the small fire in the hearth, seeing it not just as a source of warmth, but as a living manifestation of Asha, the divine order that keeps the stars in their courses and the seasons in their cycle. You murmur a few words of protection, a soft hum that vibrates in your chest, asking for the strength to maintain a pure mind and a steady hand. These rituals are the anchors of your life. They remind you that even when you are a stranger in a distant land, you are never truly alone. The fire recognizes you, and in its flickering light you see the faces of your ancestors, men who wore the same pointed caps and felt coats, who stood in these same vaulted halls and looked out at the same indifferent moon. Your clothing, so heavy and cumbersome during the heat of a summer day, is now your greatest ally against the encroaching frost. The felt of your coat is dense, pressed tight to repel the wind, and as you pull it tighter around your shoulders, you feel the ingenious design of your people. The high collar protects the nape of your neck, and the long sleeves can be pulled down to cover your hands, acting as makeshift mittens when the temperature drops below freezing. Your boots, made of supple but durable leather and lined with fur, have kept your toes from the bite of the mountain ice, and though they are caked with the dust of the road, they represent the stability of your journey. You think of the artisans in the workshops of the Fergana Valley who stitch these garments, their needles moving with a precision that mirrors your own careful calculations of profit and loss. Every stitch is a prayer for safety, every layer a barrier against the chaos of the wild. As the night deepens, the sounds of the caravanserai begin to soften into a singular, low-frequency hum, the distant braying of a camel, the muffled clatter of a cooking pot, the low murmur of men speaking in dialects you only half understand. It all blends into a lullaby of human presence. You find yourself thinking about the nature of your role as a cultural bridge. You have seen the way a piece of silk from the East can change the status of a nobleman in the West, and how a vial of Mediterranean cobalt can transform the pottery of a village thousands of miles away. You are the one who facilitates these transformations. You are the invisible hand that moves the pieces across the board, not for power, but for the simple, enduring purpose of connection. It is a tiring life, filled with long silences and the constant threat of the unknown, but there is a profound peace in it. You are a citizen of the road, and your home is wherever the fire is lit and the stories are shared. The weight of your history and your faith acts like a heavy blanket, pressing you down into a state of deep contemplative rest. You reflect on the linguistic prowess that is your birthright. How, as a child, you learn to listen to the spaces between words, to understand the intent behind a gesture as much as the meaning of a phrase. This sensitivity has saved your life more than once, allowing you to navigate the delicate politics of a local chieftain or the desperate needs of a fellow traveller. It is a form of magic, this ability to translate the world, and as you drift closer to sleep, the different languages you know begin to swirl together into a single wordless stream of consciousness. The Sogdian, the Persian, the Turkic, the Chinese. They all become one breath, one long exhale into the darkness. You feel the stiffness in your back beginning to dissolve, the muscles that have been tensed against the cold finally surrendering to the warmth of the room. The stone beneath you is no longer a hard surface, but a solid foundation, a piece of the earth that holds you steady while the world turns. You are a Sogdian merchant, a weaver of the Silk Road, and tonight your work is done. The winter may be long, and the path ahead may be buried in snow, but you have your coat, you have your fire, and you have the quiet strength of 1,000 years of heritage to carry you through the night. The shadows on the wall dance in a slow rhythmic pattern, mimicking the swaying gait of a camel on a long afternoon, and you find yourself following that rhythm, letting it lead you away from the concerns of the day and into the vast, silent territory of your dreams. The rituals you performed earlier leave a lingering sense of sanctity in the air, a feeling that this small space has been claimed and sanctified. You are protected by the good thoughts you have cultivated, the good words you have spoken, and the good deeds you have performed in your dealings with others. In the Zoroastrian way, you have contributed to the light, and now the light repays you with a sense of profound security. The darkness outside is not an enemy, but merely the absence of the sun, a necessary pause before the world begins its work anew. You breathe in the scent of the wood smoke one last time, a deep cleansing breath that fills your lungs and settles your spirit. The heavy felt of your coat, the sturdy leather of your boots, the memory of the turquoise domes, all of it fades into a gentle grey mist, leaving only the warmth of the coals and the steady, quiet pulse of your own existence in the heart of the great Silk Road. The iron key feels heavy and cold in your palm, a solid weight that anchors you to the responsibilities of the house as you step away from the flickering hearth and toward the narrow stone stairs leading down. Your footsteps are muffled by the thick wool of your socks, each step a soft thud against the packed earth and cool limestone of the cellar floor. As you descend, the air changes, losing the sharp, dry bite of the mountain wind and taking on a dense, sweet stillness that smells of ancient dust and distant lands. This is the heart of your enterprise, the silent treasury where the wealth of the East and the West rests side by side, waiting for the spring thaw to release them back into the world. You carry a single oil lamp, its flame a small amber bead that pushes back the shadows just enough to reveal the outlines of crates, jars, and bundles stacked high against the walls. You begin your rounds, a slow and rhythmic inventory that is as much a meditation as it is a task of commerce. You move first to the corner where the silks are kept, stored in long lacquered tubes to protect them from the damp and the nibbling teeth of mice. You slide a scroll of Tang Dynasty silk from its casing, feeling the incredible liquid smoothness of the fabric against your calloused fingertips. It is cool to the touch, almost like water, yet it possesses a hidden strength that has survived thousands of miles on the backs of camels. In the dim light, the weave shimmers with a pale, iridescent glow. Patterns of phoenixes and swirling clouds that seem to move when the lamplight flickers. You run your hand down the length of the bolt, noting the density of the thread and the perfection of the dye, a deep, celestial blue that was achieved in the workshops of Chang'an. It is a quiet miracle, this marriage of insect labor and human artistry, resting here in the dark of a Central Asian winter. As you carefully return the silk to its tube, the scent of the room begins to bloom around you, stirred by your movement. It is a thick, intoxicating perfume that clings to the back of your throat, the sharp medicinal bite of cloves from the Spice Islands, the earthy heat of black pepper from the Malabar coast, and the resinous, woody sweetness of frankincense gathered from the scorched cliffs of southern Arabia. You walk toward the large earthen jars, their surfaces rough and cool as you pat them in greeting. Each jar is a world unto itself. You lean in close, inhaling the aroma of dried ginger and the faint, floral ghost of saffron threads, so precious they are kept in a locked iron box inside a secondary wooden chest. These scents are the ghosts of summer, the essence of sun-drenched tropical forests and monsoon rains trapped here in the frozen silence of the mountains. You move deeper into the cellar, where the heavier goods are stored, and your lamplight catches the dull silver glint of Sasanian metalwork. You reach out to touch a large, shallow bowl, tracing the raised relief of a royal hunt with your thumb. The silver is heavy, chilled by the subterranean air, and you feel the intricate details of the king's crown and the tensed muscles of a leaping lion. The craftsmanship is bold and precise, a testament to the silversmiths of Ctesiphon who hammered this vessel into being. Next to it sit glass carafes from the Mediterranean, their surfaces clouded with a delicate, rainbow-like patina, and bronze mirrors from the east that reflect nothing but the soft orange glow of your lamp. You count them one by one, your lips moving in a silent tally, ensuring that everything is exactly where it should be. The administrative weight of your life settled here,
amongst the crates and the shadows, feels less like a burden and more like a comforting structure. You pull a small wooden stool toward a low table where your parchment ledgers are kept, the leather bindings creaking softly in the quiet. You set the lamp down and pick up a bundle of documents, your fingers brushing over the wax seals that secure the most important contracts. The wax is hard and brittle now, impressed with the signet rings of merchants from Samarkand, Sogdian princes, and Chinese magistrates. You examine the seals closely, looking for any sign of tampering, but they remain unbroken.
Tiny, red and black guardians of your reputation and your future. You open a ledger, the paper thick and slightly yellowed, covered in the elegant, flowing script of your native Sogdian. Each line is a record of a journey, a list of goods exchanged, a debt owed, or a profit realized. You trace the columns of numbers with a quill, not to write, but simply to verify the reality of your holdings. Here is the shipment of musk from the Tibetan plateau. Here are the 36 horses traded for tea and copper. Here is the weight of the raw jade, still uncarved and milky white, waiting in the crate beneath the stairs. The act of counting is a rhythmic pulse, 1, 2, 3, a way of ordering the chaotic world outside into something understandable and safe. The dry, papery sound of the pages turning is the only noise in the cellar, a soft rasp that underscores the profound stillness of the house above you. As you sit there, surrounded by the wealth of half the world, you realize that these objects are more than just commodities. They are stories held in suspension. The pepper was carried by sailors who navigated by the stars. The silk was woven by women whose songs are lost to time. The silver was mined from the deep veins of the earth by men who never saw the light of day. You are the custodian of these stories, the bridge between the forest and the court, the mountain and the sea. The responsibility settles into your bones, a pleasant ache that reminds you of your place in the great, shifting tapestry of the Silk Road. You reach out to touch the wax seal on a particularly large scroll, feeling the raised image of a winged camel, the emblem of your family's trading house. The wax is cool and smooth, a tiny island of certainty. You think of the spring, when the passes will open and the caravans will once again begin their slow, swaying march across the deserts. But for now, the stillness is enough. The inventory is complete. The goods are safe, the wealth is accounted for. You close the ledger and tie the leather thongs back into a neat bow, the sound echoing softly against the stone walls. Before you leave, you take one last look around the cellar, the light of your lamp casting long, dancing shadows that stretch and shrink as you move. The jars of spices, the tubes of silk, the crates of metal and stone, they all seem to settle deeper into their places, as if they, too, are settling in for a long sleep. The air is heavy with the scent of 1,000 miles, a perfume of travel and time that fills your senses and calms your mind. You pick up the lamp, the flame steady and bright, and begin the slow climb back up the stairs. With every step upward, the air grows slightly warmer, carrying the faint lingering scent of the wood smoke from the hearth above. The transition from the cold, silent treasury of the cellar to the living warmth of the house is a gentle one, a shift from the world of commerce to the world of rest. You reach the top of the stairs and turn the heavy iron key in the lock, the mechanism clicking into place with a satisfying final thud. The treasures are locked away, protected by stone and shadow, leaving you free to return to the simple comforts of the fire and the night. You stand for a moment by the door, the key still warm in your hand, listening to the silence of the caravanserai. The world is vast, and you have seen much of it. But tonight, your world is small, contained within these thick walls, and that is more than enough. The smell of wood smoke clings to your heavy wool tunic, a scent that has become as much a part of you as the calluses on your palms or the rhythm of your own breathing. You step away from the heavy iron-bound door of the storehouse, your boots crunching softly on the dusting of frost that has crept across the courtyard stones. The air is so cold it feels thin, almost brittle, but as you move toward the communal hall, a low, melodic hum of human voices begins to drift through the darkness, pulling you toward the golden light spilling from the arched windows. Inside, the world of the Silk Road has condensed into a single, soot-stained room, a microcosm of the empires you have traversed, all huddled together against the indifferent cruelty of the mountain winter. As you push open the heavy timber door, the heat hits your face like a physical weight, thick with the aroma of roasting mutton, bitter tea, and the damp, earthy musk of drying wool. You find a place on a low bench near the periphery of the central fire, letting your eyes adjust to the flickering shadows. Here, the rigid boundaries of the outside world have begun to soften, melted away by the shared necessity of survival. To your left, a group of Buddhist monks from the Kushan lands sit cross-legged, their saffron robes dimmed by layers of travel-worn grey cloaks. They speak in low, rhythmic tones, their heads bowed in a way that suggests they are perpetually listening to something just beyond the reach of the wind. Beside them, a pair of soldiers, mercenaries hired to guard a spice caravan from the south, have laid their curved blades across their knees. They are cleaning the steel with slow, methodical strokes, the rasp of the whetstone providing a steady heartbeat to the room's chatter. You watch the way the light plays across the faces of these strangers, noticing the subtle shifts in their features, the high cheekbones of the steppe dwellers, the dark, deep-set eyes of the Persians, and the weathered, sun-etched skin of the craftsmen who have spent their lives bent over looms and anvils. There is a jeweller from Merv sitting nearby, his fingers, stained with the oils of his trade, nervously tracing the patterns on a ceramic bowl. He looks like a man who is used to the intricate silence of his workshop, yet here he is, trapped by the snow with men who have killed for a living and men who have prayed for a living. And yet, there is no tension tonight, only a profound, weary sense of camaraderie. The snow has made equals of you all, stripping away the pretenses of the road until only the shared warmth of the hearth remains. The air is thick with a tapestry of tongues, a beautiful tangled mess of dialects that you have learned to navigate over years of bartering and travel. You hear the sharp, glottal stops of Sogdian mixing with the fluid, vowel-heavy flow of Prakrit and the guttural strength of Turkic dialects from the north. It is the lingua franca of the merchant, a language not just of words, but of gestures, of the way a hand is held to show the quality of a silk, or the way a brow is furrowed to signal a price is too high. You find yourself nodding as a man across the fire tells a story in a dialect you only half understand, his hands painting pictures in the smoky air. You understand the shape of his fatigue, the longing in his voice for a hearth that doesn't belong to a stranger, and the simple relief of a full belly. In this room, the vast geography of the East is bridged by a shared cup of tea and the common vocabulary of the weary traveller. Your gaze wanders to the far corner of the hall, where the social hierarchy of the caravan is most visible, yet even here it is muted. The wealthy masters, the men who own the hundreds of camels currently shivering in the stables, sit on the plush rugs they brought from their own homes, their fingers adorned with heavy signet rings. They speak in hushed, serious tones about the loss of profit and the rising cost of fodder, their faces tight with the anxiety of men who have much to lose. But just a few feet away, leaning against the soot-blackened pillars, are the camel drivers, the men who actually walk the miles, who know the temperament of every beast and the shifting scent of a coming storm. Their clothes are patched and repatched, their hands cracked by the alkaline dust of the deserts, yet they are the ones laughing the loudest. They share a skin of sour wine, passing it back and forth with a casual intimacy that the masters can never truly share. You realize as you watch them that while the masters own the goods, the drivers own the road itself. They are the ones who truly understand the rhythm of the journey. There is a quiet beauty in this blending of lives, a sense that for a few weeks the world has stopped spinning and allowed you all to simply exist beside one another. You see a young apprentice, no more than 14, sitting at the feet of an elderly weaver from Samarkand. The old man is showing the boy how to tie a specific knot, his gnarled fingers moving with a grace that belies his age. There is no money changing hands here, no contract being signed. It is simply the passing of knowledge from one generation to the next, fueled by the stillness of the winter. You feel the weight of your own experiences settling in your chest, a heavy but not unpleasant burden. You have been that boy, eager and frightened, and you have been the merchant, calculating and cold. Now, in the amber glow of the caravanserai, you are simply a man among men, a single thread in a vast, multicolored fabric. The fire pops, a shower of sparks drifting upward toward the hole in the ceiling, disappearing into the black square of the night sky. The sound brings your attention back to the physical sensations of the moment, the way the heat makes your skin tingle, the slight ache in your lower back from days of riding, and the comforting weight of the wool cloak draped over your shoulders. You reach out and take a piece of flatbread offered by a traveller sitting next to you, a man you have never spoken to, and likely never will again. The bread is dry and tastes of wood ash, but it is warm, and as you chew, you feel a deep sense of gratitude for this small, temporary sanctuary. The wind howls outside, rattling the heavy shutters, a reminder of the frozen wasteland that waits just beyond the walls, but here the air is still and the company is kind. As the night deepens, the conversations begin to taper off, replaced by the soft sounds of people settling into their bedrolls. The soldiers lean back against their packs, their eyes closing even as their hands remain near their weapons. The monks pull their robes tighter, their breathing slowing into a meditative rhythm. You watch the fire die down to a bed of glowing embers, the light turning from gold to a deep, pulsing crimson. The hierarchy that seemed so important during the heat of the day has completely dissolved now. In the dim light, the master and the driver, the monk and the mercenary, all look the same, shadowy forms seeking the same solace of sleep. You realize that this is perhaps the greatest secret of the Silk Road. It is not the goods carried or the gold earned that defines the journey, but these quiet hours of shared humanity, where the vastness of the world is forgotten in favor of the warmth of a neighbor's shoulder. You feel a profound sense of peace settling over you, a stillness that matches the snow-covered peaks outside. The road will be there tomorrow or next week, or whenever the mountain decides to let you pass. The treasures you locked away are safe, but they feel distant now, less real than the sound of a stranger's soft snoring or the smell of the dying fire. You lean your head back against the cool stone wall, closing your eyes and letting the muffled sounds of the caravanserai wash over you like a slow-moving tide. You are not alone in the dark. You are surrounded by 100 different lives, 100 different stories, all resting together in the heart of the winter, waiting for the sun to return. Beneath the floorboards, a different kind of life hums in the darkness, a steady, rhythmic grinding that anchors you to the earth. It is the sound of the Bactrian camels, those great shaggy sentinels of the wastes as they work through their cud in the lower stables. The sound is thick and wet, a slow, repetitive motion that seems to mirror the very rotation of the stars above. You can hear the occasional low grunt, the shift of a heavy limb against the packed dirt, and the dry rustle of fodder being moved from side to side. It is a comforting sound, one that speaks of endurance and the quiet patience of creatures who have walked 1,000 miles just to stand here, in this moment, sheltered from the biting wind. As you lie still, you begin to feel a gentle warmth radiating upward through the thick timber and the layers of woven rugs beneath you. It is the collective heat of the livestock, a living furnace rising from the belly of the caravanserai. In the height of a Silk Road winter, This animal heat is more reliable than any hearth fire, a soft and pervasive glow that softens the chill of the stone walls and keeps the frost from creeping into your marrow. You can almost feel their breath, thick and humid, mingling with the scent of dry earth and old wool, creating a microclimate of survival in the heart of the mountain pass. It is a reminder that you are part of a larger ecosystem, a delicate balance of human ambition and animal strength, bound together by the necessity of the journey. Earlier in the evening, before the light had fully retreated, you had gone down to the stables yourself to ensure their comfort. The relationship between a Sogdian merchant and his camels is not merely one of master and beast. It is a profound unspoken contract. You had moved among them, your hands disappearing into the deep, matted fur of their necks, feeling the solid muscle and the steady heartbeat beneath. You fed them handfuls of dried hay, the stalks crackling in the quiet air, and gave them the precious blocks of salt they craved to keep their strength in the thin mountain air. To care for them is to care for your own life, for without their broad backs and their ability to find water where there is none, your silks and spices would be nothing more than colourful debris scattered across the dunes. There is a specific smell to the stables that you have grown to love over the many years of your travels, a mixture of musk, dried grass, and the sharp tang of ammonia, all mellowed by the cold. It is the smell of progress, the smell of the road itself. You remember the way one of the elder bulls looked at you as you offered him a treat, his large dark eyes reflecting the flickering lantern light, his long lashes coated in a fine dusting of snow that had yet to melt. There is a deep intelligence in those eyes, a stoic acceptance of the long miles and the heavy burdens. You felt a surge of gratitude then, a realization that these beasts are the true architects of the world's commerce, carrying the weight of empires on their humps without complaint. The warmth continues to seep through the floor, and you shift your weight, finding a soft spot on your palate. The ache in your lower back, earned from days of riding and walking alongside the caravan, begins to dissolve into a dull, manageable thrum. You think of the camels down below, their long legs tucked beneath them as they rest in the straw, their bodies pressed together for warmth. They are your silent partners, the ones who navigate the shifting sands of the Taklamakan and the treacherous scree of the Pamirs. In the silence of the night, their presence is a grounding force, a steady pulse that says you have made it through another day, and that the morning will bring another chance to move forward. You find yourself matching your breathing to the slow, heavy rhythm of the stable below. In and out, a long, measured cycle that calms the racing thoughts of profit, loss, and the dangers of the trail. The world outside the caravanserai is vast and indifferent, a landscape of ice and wind that could swallow a man whole and never leave a trace. But here, within these walls, there is a shared sanctuary. The heat of the camels, the smell of the hay, and the sound of the cud chewing all create a sense of profound safety. It is a symbiotic existence. You provide them with protection and sustenance, and in return they give you the means to reach the distant horizons of your dreams. As the night deepens, the sounds from the stables grow even more rhythmic, a lullaby of the Silk Road that has been played for centuries. You imagine the dust settling on their humps, the way the light from a single guttering torch casts long swaying shadows across the stable floor. You are tucked away in your room, wrapped in layers of wool and history, while beneath you the engines of your trade rest and recover. The connection you feel to these animals is a golden thread woven into the fabric of your life, pulling you across the map from the markets of Samarkand to the gates of Chang'an. Eventually, the distinction between your own body and the warmth of the building begins to blur. You are no longer just a merchant, a man of ledgers and contracts. You are a part of the stone, the wood, and the living breath of the beasts below. The winter wind may howl against the heavy gates of the caravanserai, and the snow may pile high against the walls, but here, in the heart of the structure, there is a stillness that cannot be broken. You close your eyes tighter, letting the sound of the camels chewing their cud lead you toward a dreamless sleep, knowing that as long as they are resting, the world is exactly as it should be. The road is long, and the mountains are high, but for tonight, the warmth of the herd is enough to keep the world at bay. The smell of bitter almond oil and cedarwood smoke clings to the heavy folds of your tunic, a scent that has become your constant companion through these weeks of isolation. As the year reaches its deepest point, the air inside the caravanserai changes. It grows thick with a sense of waiting, a collective breath held against the absolute stillness of the frozen world outside. You find yourself standing in the central courtyard as the light begins to fail, watching the shadows stretch until they are long enough to touch the high, arched ceilings of the stables. The winter solstice is not merely a date on a calendar to you. It is a physical weight, the moment when the darkness is at its most arrogant, threatening to swallow the road and the silk and the memory of the sun entirely. You feel the chill of the stone floor through your leather boots, a reminder of the permafrost that lies just inches beneath the foundation. To combat this, the ritual begins not with words, but with the striking of flint. You watch as the fire tenders approach the great iron braziers set in the corners of the court, their movements slow and deliberate, as if they are handling the very soul of the community. As the first sparks catch, the orange glow dances across the faces of your fellow merchants, men from Samarkand, Panjikent, and even further east, their features softened by the flickering light. There is a profound spiritual gravity in this moment. You believe, as your fathers did, that every flame lit on this longest night is a small victory for the Lord of Wisdom against the creeping cold of the spirit. The sacred fires are not just for warmth, they are beacons meant to guide the returning light back to the world. You stand near the heat, feeling the sudden, sharp prickle of warmth on your wind-chapped skin, and you let out a sigh you didn't know you were holding. Meanwhile, the kitchen becomes the true heart of the fortress. The heavy, rhythmic sound of wooden spoons against copper reaches your ears, a steady thrumming that promises comfort. You wander toward the communal cooking area, where the air is humid and sweet with the steam of the feast. Great copper pots, their surfaces hammered with intricate patterns of vines and birds, sit atop the coals. Inside, a rich pottage of lamb and cracked grains bubbles slowly, the fat rising to the surface in golden rings. The aroma is intoxicating, a blend of cumin, dried coriander, and the deep, earthy scent of slow-cooked meat that makes the hollow ache in your stomach sharpen with anticipation. You take your place among the others, sitting on thick wool carpets that have been layered 3 deep to keep the rising dampness of the earth at bay. There is no hierarchy tonight. The master of the caravan sits beside the youngest stable hand, for the darkness makes all men equal in their need for light. Large communal platters are brought out, and you find yourself reaching for the treasures of the Fergana Valley, preserved through the autumn just for this occasion. You pick up a dried apricot, its skin leathery and dusted with a fine coating of natural sugar, and as you bite into it, the concentrated flavor of a lost summer explodes on your tongue. There are walnuts, too, their shells already cracked, and raisins that have turned dark and chewy like wine-soaked earth. You share these small, precious things with the man beside you, passing a bowl of salted pistachios back and forth in a silent exchange of kinship. The wine is poured next, a deep ruby-coloured vintage brought in heavy ceramic jars from the sun-drenched slopes of the valley. It is strong and slightly sweet, tasting of wood and dark berries. As you take a long, slow sip, you feel the liquid heat travel down your throat and spread through your chest, unraveling the knots of tension in your shoulders. The conversation around you is hushed, a low murmur that blends with the crackle of the logs. People speak of home, of the gardens of Samarkand, where the roses will bloom again, and of the families waiting behind high mud-brick walls. You listen to the cadence of the Sogdian tongue, its familiar sounds wrapping around you like a second cloak. In this shared space, the fear of the mountain passes, and the uncertainty of the spring markets seem to melt away. The spiritual significance of the night settles over the room, a quiet understanding that while the night is long, it is also the womb of the coming year. As the hours grow small, you look into the heart of the sacred fire. The flames have turned a pale, ghostly blue at their base, licking at the charred remains of the juniper branches. You feel a strange sense of timelessness, as if you are not just a merchant on a specific journey in the year 700, but a part of a much longer chain of travellers who have huddled around this same hearth for centuries. The light reflects in the polished copper of the pots and the glazed tiles of the walls, creating a world of gold and shadow that feels more real than the frozen wasteland outside the gates. Your eyes grow heavy, the combination of the rich meal, the potent wine, and the hypnotic pulse of the fire drawing you down into a state of blissful lethargy. You lean back against a bolster stuffed with raw wool, feeling the texture of the fabric against the back of your neck. The world is reduced to this circle of warmth, this brotherhood of the road, and the steady, reassuring glow of the embers. You realize that the longest night is not a hardship to be endured, but a sanctuary to be cherished. And so, as the fire tenders move quietly to add one last heavy log to the brazier, ensuring the light will last until the first grey hint of dawn, you allow your chin to drop toward your chest. The sound of the wind outside is nothing more than a faint, distant memory, a ghost that cannot find its way through the thick stone walls. You are safe, you are fed, and the light is holding. You drift into a soft, velvet sleep, cradled by the ancient rhythm of the solstice, knowing that when you wake, the sun will have begun its slow, inevitable journey back to you. The smell of roasting fat and the low, resonant hum of voices pull you back from the edges of that velvet slumber, though you do not fully open your eyes. You remain in that soft, liminal space where the warmth of the fire feels like a heavy blanket pressing against your skin, and the world outside the caravanserai is nothing more than a myth. The air in the common room has grown thick and sweet with the scent of cedar wood and the lingering aroma of spiced tea, a fragrance that clings to your hair and the weave of your wool tunic. You shift your weight slightly, feeling the rough texture of the rug beneath you, and listen. In these long frozen months, when the mountain passes are choked with snow and the camels rest in the stables below, storytelling becomes the true currency of the Silk Road. It is not the gold diners in your belt, or the bolts of patterned silk in your packs that matter now, but the weight of a well-told tale. You lean your head back against a stone pillar, the coldness of the rock a sharp, grounding contrast to the heat of the hearth, and let the words of the elders wash over you. The tradition of the Sogdian people is one of movement, but it is also one of memory, a way to carry the entire world within your mind even when your feet are bound to a single room for the winter. A traveller from the west, his voice raspy from years of desert wind, begins to speak of the simur. You close your eyes tighter, imagining the great mythical bird, her feathers the colour of 1,000 jewels, nesting in the heights of the Alborz mountains. The narrator describes how she has witnessed the destruction of the world 3 times over, possessing the wisdom of all the ages. You can almost see the shimmer of her wings in the flickering orange light of the fire, a creature so vast that her flight brings rain and her touch heals the deepest wounds of the soul. These are the stories that have traveled the length of the world, passed from lip to ear in the high mountain valleys and the lowland plains, weaving a tapestry of wonder that makes the walls of the caravanserai feel as thin as parchment. The tales shift then, drifting toward the heroes of the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. The voices around the fire drop an octave, adopting a reverent rhythmic cadence. You hear of Rostam and his mighty steed Raksh, their exploits echoing through the centuries. The narrator speaks of honor, of tragic misunderstandings, and of the immense strength required to navigate a world governed by fate. The words are hypnotic, a slow melodic drumbeat that matches the pulsing of the embers in the hearth. You find yourself drifting into the story, feeling the phantom weight of a spear in your hand and the cold spray of a distant river against your face. It is a way of reclaiming your heritage, of remembering that you are part of a lineage that stretches back to the dawn of time, far beyond the reach of the winter storms. As the night deepens, the tone of the gathering turns from the mythical to the worldly. A merchant, who arrived just before the first heavy snowfall, begins to recount news from the east, from the great Tang capital of Chang'an. He speaks of the city's grid-like streets, so wide that a dozen wagons could pass abreast, and the shimmering brilliance of the Daming Palace. You listen intently to the whispers of political shifts, of the changing moods of the emperor, and the shifting alliances of the court. In the quiet of the mountains, these reports feel like messages from another planet. Yet you know that when the spring thaw comes, these very whispers will dictate the price of your goods and the safety of the roads you travel. The narrator describes the bustling markets of the Western Quarter, where Sogdian wine cellars and musicians are the height of fashion, and for a moment you feel a pang of longing for the vibrant, chaotic energy of the capital. There is a strange, soothing quality to this exchange of information. It is not the frantic news of the modern age, but a slow distillation of events, filtered through months of travel and the perspectives of many different men. You hear of new techniques for weaving silk, of the rising influence of the Buddhist monasteries, and of the strange, beautiful glasswork coming out of the Roman lands to the far west. Each piece of news is a thread, and as you sit there in the dim light, you feel yourself being woven back into the fabric of the world. The isolation of the winter begins to fade, replaced by a sense of profound connection to the vast, interconnected web of humanity that stretches from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. The storytelling is not merely a way to pass the time, it is a ritual of survival. In the darkness of the solstice, when the sun is weak and the world feels fragile, these narratives provide a structure, a reason to keep the fire burning. You watch the way the light plays across the faces of your companions, the deep lines around their eyes, the grey in their beards, the way their hands move to emphasize a point. They are all, in their own way, keepers of the flame. The stories are the bridge that will carry you through the long evening hours and into the light of a new season. The fire pops, a small explosion of sparks that dance upward toward the soot-stained ceiling, and the conversation lulls into a comfortable silence. You feel a deep physical contentment, a sense of belonging that only comes from shared hardship and shared wonder. The ache in your lower back, earned from weeks in the saddle, seems to dissolve into the warmth of the rug. You are no longer just a merchant waiting for the snow to melt. You are a witness to the history of the world, a small but vital part of a story that is still being written. The narrator's voice softens, becoming a mere murmur, a lullaby of names and places that you know as well as your own reflection. Samarkand, Bukhara, Merv, Panjakent. The names hum in the air like a prayer. You think of your home, the gardens filled with apricot trees and the sound of the Zarafshan River rushing past the city walls. The memory is sharp and sweet, a promise of what awaits you when the cycle of the year turns once more,
You realize that these stories are not just about the past, they are maps for the future, reminders of the resilience of the human spirit and the enduring power of the road. As the evening wanes, the groups around the hearth begin to disperse, men retreating to their bedrolls in the shadows of the room. You stay a moment longer, staring into the glowing heart of the fire. The logs have collapsed into a bed of radiant coals, pulsing with a deep internal heat that seems to mirror the steady beating of your own heart. The silence that follows the storytelling is not empty. It is full of the echoes of the legends you have just heard, a rich, resonant quiet that settles over the room like a layer of fresh snow. You finally pull your heavy cloak tighter around your shoulders and prepare to settle in for the night. The transition from the warmth of the fire to the cooler edges of the room is gentle, a slow fading of sensation. You find your spot on the floor, the wool of your blankets smelling of home and the long journey you have undertaken. As you lay your head down, the images of the Simurgh and the golden towers of Chang'an swirl together in your mind, a kaleidoscope of dreams that will guide you through the remaining hours of the dark. The wind may howl against the stone outside, and the ice may thicken on the troughs in the courtyard, but inside the world is vast and warm. You are cradled by the collective memory of your people, protected by the thick walls of the caravanserai and the enduring strength of the tales you have shared. The long winter night is no longer a void to be feared, but a space to be filled with the richness of the imagination. You close your eyes, the rhythmic breathing of the men around you serving as a final, soothing anchor, and allow yourself to be carried away on the slow, steady current of sleep. The weight of your heavy wool cloak presses against your shoulders, a familiar burden that carries the faint, lingering scent of sandalwood and old wood smoke. As you drift in that soft space between wakefulness and the deep quiet of the winter night, your mind begins to turn over the intricate puzzles of the trade, the way a jeweler might turn a raw gemstone under a lamp to catch the light. Behind your closed eyes, the silent ledgers of your memory begin to unfurl. You find yourself calculating the fluctuating value of silver dirhams against the weight of raw silk, considering how the price of musk might rise in the coming months as the mountain passes remain choked with snow. There is a strange, quiet rhythm to these internal monologues, a cadence of profit and loss that feels as steady and reassuring as the beating of your own heart. You recall the sharp, metallic tang of the markets in Merv, where the air was always thick with the sound of 1,000 voices shouting in a dozen different tongues. In your mind, you are standing once again in the shadow of a sun-bleached colonnade, your fingers tracing the rough texture of a hempen sack, while your eyes remain fixed on the merchant across from you. It was a dance of gestures and glances, the way a man might tilt his head to signal hesitation, or the subtle softening of his gaze that whispered of a willingness to compromise. You remember the heat of the sun on the back of your neck, and the way the dust would settle in the fine lines of your palms, turning the skin a pale, earthy grey. In those moments, the world felt incredibly small, shrunk down to the space between two men and the goods that lay piled on the ground between them. The memory of Bukhara is even more vivid, a city of turquoise domes and narrow, winding alleys that smelled of roasted lamb and damp earth. You can almost feel the cool, polished surface of the stone bench where you sat for hours, sipping tea and discussing the finer points of a contract. For a Sogdian, a word given is a heavy thing, but a word written is a sacred bond. You think of the delicate balance of credit that sustains your entire life, the way trust is extended across thousands of miles, carried by messengers on horseback and sealed with wax and signet rings. It is a fragile web, woven from the reputations of fathers and grandfathers, yet it is stronger than the iron gates of any fortress. You take a slow, deep breath, feeling the comfort of that invisible network, knowing that even here, in the isolated silence of a frozen caravanserai,
Your name carries weight in cities you have not seen for years. As the warmth of the firs settles over you, your thoughts begin to wander further back, drifting away from the cold stone walls and toward the shimmering, golden haze of the Gobi Desert. In your recollection, the heat is no longer a hardship, but a dreamlike embrace that softens the edges of the world. You remember the way the horizon would ripple and blur, creating lakes of phantom water that vanished as soon as you turned your head. The sand was never just one color. It was a shifting palette of ochre, pale cream, and deep burnt orange, moving in slow, rhythmic waves under the command of the wind. You can feel the rhythmic sway of the camel beneath you once more, a steady, hypnotic motion that seemed to synchronize with the passing of the hours. The dust of the desert was everywhere. It lived in the folds of your turban, it coated your eyelashes, and it gave a gritty texture to the water in your skin. Yet, there was a profound peace in that vast, empty space. There were no ledgers there, no contracts to sign, only the sun and the wind and the long stretching shadows of the late afternoon. You remember the silence of the dunes at dusk, a silence so deep it felt as though the earth itself were holding its breath. The transition from the searing heat of the day to the biting chill of the desert night was a transition you made 1,000 times, a cycle of endurance that taught you the value of patience. Even now, with the winter wind howling against the thick timber doors of the caravanserai, you can feel that desert sun on your skin. It is a phantom warmth, a memory of light that sustains you through the long, dark months of the northern trek. You find yourself thinking of the specific weight of a gold solidus in the palm of your hand, the cool, smooth metal, and the way the light glints off the stamped image of an emperor. You compare it to the rougher, cast copper coins of the East, considering the vast distances those small pieces of metal must travel to find their way into a merchant's pouch. Every coin tells a story of a journey, of a hand that held it and a mouth that bargained for its worth. The art of the deal is not merely about the exchange of goods, you reflect, but about the understanding of human desire. You have learned to read the hunger in a man's eyes when he looks at a bolt of patterned damask, and the way a buyer's posture changes when he realizes he has found something truly rare. It is a quiet, observant life you lead. You are a watcher of people, a student of the small movements that betray a person's inner thoughts. This knowledge is your greatest asset, more valuable than the finest spices or the most translucent jade. It is the wisdom of the road, earned through years of listening and watching, of waiting for the right moment to speak and the right moment to remain silent. As you sink deeper into the softness of your bedding, the images of the markets and the deserts begin to blend together. The shouting of the traders in Merv becomes a distant, melodic hum, like the sound of bees in a summer garden. The golden sands of the Gobi transform into the soft, flickering light of the hearth fire, casting long, dancing shadows across the ceiling of the room. You feel a sense of profound contentment, a realization that your life is a tapestry woven from these disparate threads of experience. The cold of the winter is merely a pause, a necessary breath before the cycle begins anew. You think of the contracts waiting in your pack, the ink dry and the parchment stiff, representing promises made to men in distant lands. These documents are more than just business. They are the anchors that hold your world together. They represent the faith that the seasons will turn, that the snow will melt, and that the roads will once again be open to those who have the courage to walk them. You find yourself tracing the imaginary lines of a map in your mind, following the ancient routes that connect the sunrise to the sunset, feeling the immense scale of the world and your own small yet significant place within it. The ache in your back, a remnant of the day's long ride, begins to fade, replaced by a heavy, numbing warmth. You are no longer a merchant, no longer a traveller,
no longer a bargainer of silk and silver. You are simply a man at rest, protected by the stone and the wood and the shared breath of your companions. The memories of the dust and the heat are like a soft blanket, shielding you from the frost that creeps across the window panes. The internal monologue of prices and values slows down, the numbers losing their sharpness and blurring into a gentle, wordless fog. In this quietude, you realize that the greatest profit you have ever made is this moment of stillness. The ability to look back on a life of movement and find a sense of center is a rare and precious thing. The markets will always be there, the desert will always wait, and the silver will always find its way from one hand to another. But for now, there is only the slow, rhythmic pulse of the night, and the deep, enduring peace of a mind that has found its way home, even in the heart of a foreign land. You let the last of the thoughts slip away, like sand through an hourglass, until there is nothing left but the dark, the warmth, and the infinite, welcoming space of sleep.
The silence of a winter night in the high mountains has a weight to it, a physical presence that presses against the thick stone walls of the caravanserai like a heavy velvet blanket. You sit by the narrow window of your chamber, the air near the glass sharp and biting, though the rest of the room remains cradled in the lingering warmth of the evening fire. Outside, the world has been erased, replaced by a monochrome landscape of white and silver. The courtyard below, usually a chaotic symphony of braying camels, shouting porters, and the clatter of iron-rimmed wheels, is now a perfect, undisturbed square of snow. The moonlight falls upon it with a cold blue clarity, reflecting off the crystalline surface so brightly that it seems to illuminate the very rafters of your ceiling. You watch the way the shadows of the arched porticos stretch across the drifts, long and thin, like the fingers of a giant reaching toward the center of the well. There is no wind tonight. The air is so still that the falling flakes, if there were any, would descend in perfectly straight lines. But the sky is clear, a deep indigo void, salted with stars that look like chips of ice. In this stillness, you feel as though you are suspended in a pocket of time, a bubble of existence that the rest of the world has forgotten. The great Silk Road, that pulsing artery of commerce and culture, has frozen solid. The caravans are stalled, the mountain passes are choked with drifts 10 feet deep, and the fast-paced life of a merchant has been reduced to the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. There is a profound comfort in this isolation. For most of the year, your mind is a ledger of numbers, distances, and risks. You are constantly calculating the value of musk from Tibet against the price of glassware from the Roman West, or worrying if the spring rains will wash out the bridges over the Oxus. But here, in the heart of winter, the ledger is closed. Nature has made the decisions for you. You cannot leave, and no one can reach you. This forced surrender to the elements brings a meditative clarity that you rarely find in the bustling oasis cities of Samarkand or Panjikent. You wrap your heavy wool cloak tighter around your shoulders, feeling the coarse, familiar texture of the weave against your neck. The scent of wood smoke is embedded in the fibers, a reminder of every hearth that has kept you alive on this long journey. As you stare out at the moonlit snow, your thoughts inevitably drift back toward the east, crossing the frozen wastes to the warm, mud-brick walls of your family home. You imagine your wife moving through the rooms of the villa, her hands perhaps busy with the same domestic rhythms that anchor your own days. You wonder if she is looking at the same moon, though from a much lower elevation, where the air is thick with the scent of dried apricots and stored grain. You think of your children, who grow taller with every season you spend away. By the time you return, your youngest son will likely be ready to begin his own apprenticeship, learning the scripts and languages that are the true currency of the Sogdian people. A pang of longing stirs in your chest, but it is not a sharp or painful thing. It is a dull, steady ache, like a healing bone, a reminder that you are anchored to the earth by more than just silver and contracts. You are a link in a chain that stretches back through generations of travelers, men who left their homes so that their families might flourish in the garden cities of the Transoxiana. To pass these long, quiet hours, you turn your attention to the small table beside your bed, where a single oil lamp flickers, casting a warm amber glow over your few personal effects. You reach for your writing kit, the leather wrap smooth and polished from years of use. Inside are the tools of your soul, a few carefully shaved reeds, a small stone well of thick, dark ink, and rolls of fine paper that you have carried with you from the markets of the East. Calligraphy is more than just a means of recording trade. For you, it is a form of prayer, a way to impose order on the chaos of the world. You dip the reed into the ink, feeling the slight resistance as the liquid clings to the nib. Your hand, calloused from holding the reins of a horse and the rough ropes of pack saddles, becomes incredibly light and precise. You begin to write not a contract or a letter of credit, but a poem you remembered from your youth, or perhaps just a series of beautiful characters that describe the stillness of the night. The scratch of the reed against the paper is the only sound in the room, a tiny rhythmic rasp that seems to synchronize with your heartbeat. Each stroke is deliberate. You focus on the curve of the line, the way the ink thins at the end of a flourish, the perfect balance of the black marks against the pale void of the page. In this act, the cold of the mountains recedes. The isolation of the caravanserai becomes a sanctuary, a place where you can repair the frayed edges of your spirit just as surely as you might mend a tear in your favorite tunic. When your fingers grow too stiff from the cold to hold the pen, you set it aside and take up a needle and a spool of waxed thread. You spend a long time examining your travelling boots, looking for the tiny gaps where the slush of the road might seep in once the thaw begins. You work the needle through the thick leather with practiced ease, the repetitive motion lulling you into a state of deep contemplation. You think about the thousands of miles these boots have carried you, through the burning sands of the Taklamakan and the jagged rocks of the Pamirs. They are an extension of your body, a testament to your endurance. As you pull the thread tight, you feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. This is the work of the winter, to mend, to reflect, and to wait. The moonlight has shifted now, moving further across the courtyard, illuminating the far wall where a row of empty stables stands like silent sentinels. You realize that you have not heard a human voice for several hours, yet you do not feel lonely. The caravanserai itself feels alive, a great stone beast huddling against the cold, protecting the small sparks of life within its belly. You think of the other travelers sleeping in the rooms around you, the Persian spice merchant, the monk returning to China, the weary soldiers of the guard. You are all bound together by this shared suspension in time, a brotherhood of the frozen road. Eventually the lamp begins to sputter, the oil running low. You don't bother to refill it. The moonlight is enough to guide you back to the warmth of your blankets. As you lay down, the weight of the furs feels like a physical manifestation of safety. You close your eyes, and the image of the moonlit snow remains burned into your mind, a vision of purity and peace. The world outside is frozen, the high passes are locked, and the future is a distant, hazy dream. But here, in the heart of the winter solitude, you are whole. The silence is not an empty thing. It is a vessel, filled with the memories of your home and the quiet strength of your own resolve. You let yourself sink deeper into the soft darkness, listening to the house settle into the frost until the boundary between the room and your dreams begins to dissolve. The smell of the air is the first thing to betray the season's secrets. It is no longer the sharp, metallic scent of deep frost that freezes the hairs in your nostrils, but something softer, a dampness that carries the faint mineral breath of wet stone and ancient earth. You stand at the threshold of the caravanserai's heavy timber gates, your hands tucked deep into the sleeves of your sheepskin coat, watching a single bead of water fall from a long jagged icicle hanging from the eaves. It hits the mud below with a soft, rhythmic thud, a tiny drumbeat marking the end of the great stillness. The mountain peaks above the valley still wear their heavy white shrouds, but the silence that once felt like a solid wall has begun to crumble. From the high ridges, a new sound carries on the wind, a low resonant groaning, like the earth itself is stretching after a long slumber. It is the ice on the mountain streams beginning to fracture. You can hear the sharp, sudden cracks echoing through the ravines, sounding like distant hammer blows against a stone anvil. These are the voices of the water, waking up, pushing against their frozen carapaces, preparing to rush down into the valleys as the spring thaw gathers its strength. You feel a strange resonance in your own chest, a mirroring of that tension, as if the blood in your veins is also beginning to flow with a little more urgency after the long, sluggish hibernation of the winter months. You turn back toward the courtyard, and the atmosphere has shifted. The lethargy that had settled over the merchants and the grooms like a heavy blanket is lifting, replaced by a quiet, focused industry. The slow, rhythmic rasp of a whetstone against a blade hums from a corner where a guard is sharpening his scimitar. Near the stables, the smell of neatsfoot oil and old leather rises into the cool air. You find yourself drawn to your own corner of the storehouse, where your packs and harness have sat undisturbed for many weeks. The leather feels cold and stiff under your fingertips, but as you begin to work the oil into the straps, the material warms and softens, regaining the supple strength it will need for the thousands of miles ahead. There is a meditative quality to this preparation. You check every buckle, every rivet, and every stitch of the heavy canvas bags that will carry your precious silks and spices toward the western markets. You run your hands over the wooden frames of the pack saddles, feeling for any hairline fractures that the extreme cold might have worsened. Each piece of gear is a familiar friend, a silent partner in your survival, and tending to them feels like a conversation with your own future. You think of the high passes that still lie ahead, the narrow cliffside trails where a snapped cinch or a loose strap could mean the difference between a successful journey and a catastrophic loss. The weight of responsibility settles back onto your shoulders, not as a burden, but as a familiar garment you are finally ready to wear again. As you work, your mind wanders to the road. You imagine the first sight of the greening plains, the smell of the first desert blooms after a spring rain, and the bustling noise of the markets in the cities of the West. There is a fluttering in your stomach, a mixture of two very different emotions that have lived side by side in the hearts of Sogdian traders for generations. There is the sharp, cold edge of anxiety, the knowledge of the bandits who wake with the spring, the unpredictable flooding of the rivers, and the sheer physical toll the journey will take on your body and your beasts. But beneath that anxiety is a bright, burning spark of excitement. It is the thrill of the move, the deep-seated restlessness of a people who find their true home not in a single house, but in the space between two horizons. The horses and camels sense the change as well. In the stables, the air is thick with the scent of hay and the warm, musky odour of large animals. They are more restless now, their ears twitching at the sound of the melting ice, their hooves shifting impatiently in the straw. You spend a long time with your lead camel, rubbing the coarse hair of its neck and checking the pads of its feet. The animal looks at you with its large, liquid eyes, its slow chewing a constant, grounding rhythm. You share a quiet understanding. You have both survived the dark, and you will both face the dust and the sun together. The evenings in the common room have changed their tone as well. The stories are no longer about the distant past or the legends of gods and heroes. They have turned toward the practicalities of the coming weeks. Men huddle over maps drawn in the dust on the floor, debating which passes will clear first and sharing rumours of political shifts in the lands they are about to enter. You listen to the talk of tolls, of new governors, and of the price of grain in distant oases. The world, which had felt so small and contained within these stone walls, is suddenly vast and interconnected once more. You realize that you are part of a great, invisible web, a network of breath and motion that is about to stir into life across the entire continent. You find yourself eating your evening meal with more intention, fueling your body for the labor to come. The simple bowls of stew and the flatbread baked on the hearth taste different now. They are no longer just comfort against the cold, but the energy you are banking for the long marches. You feel the strength returning to your limbs, the stiffness of the winter inactivity melting away just like the snow on the southern slopes. Every time you step outside, you look toward the sky, watching the shape of the clouds and the direction of the wind. The north wind, which brought the biting frost, is losing its grip, and the breezes from the south are beginning to carry the faint, sweet promise of distant blossoms and thawing earth. Late at night, as you lie in your bedroll, the sound of the cracking ice seems louder, more insistent. It is a beautiful, violent music, the sound of the world breaking its chains. You lie there in the dark, your heart beating a little faster than it did a week ago, feeling the pull of the road like a physical tug on your soul. You are not the same person who arrived here at the start of the winter. The long silence has tempered you, clarified your purpose, and given you the rest you didn't know you needed. Now, as the winds change and the mountains begin to weep their frozen tears, you are ready to step back into the flow of time and distance. The journey is calling, and though the road will be hard, you find that you are no longer content to stay still. The winter was a gift of peace, but the spring is a gift of life. The scent of lanolin and cured leather fills the small dim room as you pull the heavy cedar trunk toward the center of the floor. It is a sound that marks the beginning of the end, a low grinding scrape against the packed earth that signals the transition from stillness back into motion. For months, this room has been your world, a sanctuary of 4 stone walls and a smouldering hearth. But now your fingers trace the iron bindings of your travel chests with a new sense of urgency. You reach for the heavy winter blankets, those thick, indigo-dyed layers of felted wool that have kept the mountain chill from your bones during the long nights of deep frost. They feel incredibly heavy in your hands, dense with the memory of the season's cold, and as you fold them one by one, pressing the air out of the fibers, you feel a phantom weight lifting from your own shoulders. You tuck them into the bottom of the trunk, smoothing the fabric with your palms, knowing you will not need their full protection again until you reach the high passes of the Pamirs, or perhaps not until the next turn of the year. In their place, you pull out the lighter gear, the tunics of thin, breathable linen, and the supple leather vests that allow for a full range of movement. These garments have been tucked away since late autumn, and as you shake them out, a faint scent of dried lavender and wormwood drifts into the air, herbs placed there months ago to ward off the moths. The fabric feels cool and light against your skin, a physical manifestation of the coming spring. You move with a slow, practiced rhythm, the deliberate pace of a man who knows that a poorly packed load is a debt that must be paid in pain on the trail. Each item has its place, a geometry of survival that you have mastered over a decade of travel. The heavier goods are positioned to sit low, keeping the center of gravity stable, while the items you might need in an instant, your flint and steel, your sharpening stone, your water skin, are kept within easy reach near the top. Outside, in the courtyard of the caravanserai, the atmosphere has shifted from the quiet lethargy of winter to a focused, industrious hum. You step out into the crisp morning air, the stones beneath your boots still holding the night's frost, and make your way toward the stables where your camels have spent the season. The smell of the animals is comforting, a musk of dry hay, old dust, and the pungent, familiar scent of the beasts themselves. You approach your lead camel, a sturdy Bactrian, with a coat that is currently shaggy and beginning to shed in great, matted clumps. You run your hand down its flank, feeling the strength of the muscle beneath the fur. During the winter, you have watched their humps carefully. They are firm and upright now, stored thick with the fat necessary to sustain them through the lean stretches of the high road where grazing will be scarce. You spend a long time checking their feet, lifting each heavy pad to ensure no stones have become wedged and that the skin is supple and free of sores. They grunt softly at your touch, a low, vibrating sound that resonates in your own chest, a mutual acknowledgement of the partnership that is about to be renewed. Nearby, your head packer is already at work on the harnesses. The sound of a metal awl piercing thick leather is rhythmic and sharp, a tiny punctuation mark in the morning quiet. You sit beside him for a while, picking up a length of stout rope to check for frays. In the dry mountain air, hemp and leather can become brittle, and a snapped cinch on a narrow ledge is a disaster you cannot afford. You rub a mixture of rendered fat and beeswax into the straps, feeling the leather soften and darken under your thumbs. You check the wooden pack saddles, looking for cracks in the frames or any signs that the padding has shifted. These are the quiet, essential tasks of the merchant, the invisible labor that ensures the silk and spices reach the markets of the West. There is a meditative quality to the work, a grounding focus on the physical materials of your trade, and you find yourself appreciating the sturdiness of the wood and the honest strength of the cordage. As the sun climbs higher, casting long pale shadows across the courtyard, you make your way to the small, cluttered office of the caravanserai master. It is a room thick with the smell of old parchment and wood smoke, the walls lined with ledgers that record the coming and going of 1,000 souls. The master is an older man, his face a map of fine lines etched by decades of mountain wind, and he greets you with the weary, respectful nod of a peer. You sit together on low cushions, a tray of bitter green tea placed between you. This is the final settling of accounts, the closing of the chapter of your winter's stay. You count out the coins, silver dirhams that clink softly as they hit the table, paying for the stabling of the animals, the bags of grain consumed, the firewood burned, and the simple meals you have shared at his board. There is no rush in this transaction. To hurry would be a mark of disrespect. You discuss the state of the roads, the rumors of snowmelt in the lower valleys, and the reports from the few travellers who have trickled in from the south. When the final coin is laid down, a weight seems to leave the room. You are no longer a guest. You are once again a traveller, untethered and ready. The final task of the day takes you to the local market, a small collection of stalls that cling to the outer walls of the caravanserai. Here you must secure the last of your provisions for the mountain passes, the high-energy foods that will sustain you when the air grows thin and the wind bites through even the thickest wool. You purchase heavy wheels of hard salted cheese and bags of dried apricots that are as tough and sweet as leather. You buy sacks of toasted barley flour, which can be mixed with water or tea to provide a quick, warming meal when a fire is impossible to light. You also seek out the specialized supplies, extra tallow for the lamps, a new supply of salt, and a small bundle of dried medicinal herbs from a mountain healer who promises they will ward off the lung fever that haunts the high altitudes. These supplies are not just food, they are insurance, a buffer against the unpredictable whims of the peaks. You weigh each bag in your hand, considering the balance of the load, before handing over the copper coins. As you walk back through the gates, the evening light is turning the distant peaks a soft, bruised purple. The air is cooling rapidly, but the bite of the wind feels different now. It no longer carries the threat of a closing door, but rather the promise of an opening path. You look at your stacked crates and your waiting animals, and you feel a quiet, steady pulse of anticipation. The winter has served its purpose. It has allowed the world to rest, and it has allowed you to gather your strength. The accounts are settled, the gear is mended, and the provisions are secured. Tonight, you will sleep one last time within these stone walls, but your mind is already leagues away, following the winding track that leads upward toward the stars. The stillness of the caravanserai is now merely a prelude to the rhythm of the road, a long indrawn breath before the first step of the journey begins. The silence is no longer a destination, but a memory you will carry with you into the wind. The air inside your small stone cell has lost its sharp, biting edge, replaced by a softness that speaks of melting snow and the patient return of the earth. You wake before the first bird calls, not to the sound of a bell or a shout, but to the internal clock of a man whose livelihood depends on the rhythm of the horizon. Your eyes open to a world of muted silver and slate grey. The pale light of a spring morning is beginning to seep through the high, narrow slit in the wall, casting a long rectangular beam across the packed dirt floor. It illuminates the motes of dust dancing in the stillness, the last remnants of your winter residence. You lie there for a moment longer, feeling the familiar weight of the heavy wool blankets, the coarse texture against your chin, and the way your body has moulded itself to the slight dip in the sleeping platform over these many months. The silence is different today. It is no longer the heavy, suffocating silence of a blizzard, but a thin, expectant quiet that vibrates with the promise of movement. You push back the covers, and the coolness of the room greets your skin, a bracing reminder that while the season has turned, the high passes are still guardians of the frost. You reach for your boots, the leather supple from the grease you applied by the fire just 2 nights ago. As you tug them on, the familiar pinch and snugness feel like an old friend's handshake. You stand, and your joints offer a faint, rhythmic protest, a slow ache in your lower back and a stiffness in your knees that has become your constant companion since you left Samarkand so many seasons ago. You wrap your heavy cloak around your shoulders, feeling the reassuring weight of the thick fabric, and step out of your cell into the gallery. Outside, the caravanserai is transforming. The courtyard, which for months was a white, frozen wasteland of drifted snow and huddled shadows, is now a hive of controlled, purposeful energy. The thawing landscape beyond the walls is mirrored here in the slush and the dark, wet patches of earth, where the sun has already begun its work. You hear the rhythmic thud of hooves against the damp ground, and the low, guttural grunting of camels as they are led from their stables. The smell of wood smoke is still present, but it is now mixed with the scent of wet wool, the sharp tang of manure, and the faint, sweet aroma of damp cedar. Men are moving with a new lightness in their step, their voices low and hushed in the pre-dawn gloom, yet carrying a resonance of excitement that has been absent for a long time. You make your way down the stone stairs, your hand trailing along the rough, cold masonry. In the center of the yard, the preparation is reaching a crescendo. You find your own animals, their breath blooming in the air like small white ghosts. You check the cinches of the packs one last time, feeling the tension of the ropes and the solid bulk of the crates containing the precious silks and spices you have guarded through the dark months. Your fingers move with practiced ease, checking the knots you could tie in your sleep, ensuring that the weight is balanced perfectly so as not to gall the animals on the long climb ahead. There is a meditative quality to this work, a sequence of checks and adjustments that grounds you in the physical reality of the journey. As the sky turns from a deep indigo to a bruised purple, you see your fellow travelers gathering near the great wooden gates. These are the men you have shared bread and stories with while the winds howled outside. You see the merchant from Merv, his face lined with the same weariness you feel, and the young traveller who spent his winter studying scrolls by the communal hearth. Final farewells are exchanged, not with grand speeches, but with firm grips of the arm and quiet nods of mutual respect. You know that as soon as you pass through those gates, your paths will diverge. Some will head south toward the lush valleys, while you must turn your face toward the rugged peaks to the east. There is a bittersweet quality to these partings. You have formed a temporary tribe in the wilderness, bound together by the shared necessity of survival, and now that bond is dissolving back into the vastness of the Silk Road. The heavy iron bolts of the main gate are drawn back with a resonant, metallic groan that echoes off the surrounding walls. It is a sound of liberation. The massive timber doors swing inward, complaining on their hinges to reveal the world beyond. The landscape is a study in transition. Patches of stubborn white snow cling to the shadows of the rocks, but the road itself is a ribbon of dark, churning mud, winding its way upward through the thawing hills. The air that rushes in is sharp and carries the scent of distant pines and the raw, mineral smell of wet stone. It fills your lungs, chasing away the stale, recycled air of the hearth fire and the crowded stables. You take hold of the lead rope, feeling the steady, rhythmic pull of your lead camel behind you. You take that first step out of the caravanserai, and your boot sinks into the soft, yielding mud of the road. It is a messy, unglamorous beginning, but the sensation of forward motion is intoxicating. The ground beneath you is awakening, shifting and sighing as the frost leaves the soil. You look back one last time at the high, formidable walls of the fortress that kept you safe, its stones glowing a pale honey gold in the first true rays of the rising sun. It looks smaller now, a lonely island of civilization in a sea of rising mountains. As you walk, the rhythm of the road begins to take hold of you once more. The slow swaying gait of the camels, the creak of the leather harnesses, and the steady crunch of gravel beneath your feet create a symphony of travel that lulls the mind into a state of focused calm. The road is difficult, filled with puddles and slick stretches of half-frozen earth, but each step is a reclamation of your purpose. The long winter of waiting is over. The horizon, once a distant and frozen dream, is now a tangible goal, shifting and changing with every mile you cover. You adjust your cloak, settling the weight across your shoulders, and breathe in the cold, bright promise of the spring morning. The path ahead is long and the mountains are high, but the road is open, and you are moving, drifting further from the stillness of the walls and deeper into the heartbeat of the world. The rhythm of the journey returns to you not as a new sensation, but as the reclaiming of a forgotten language spoken by your own limbs. The steady, hypnotic swaying of your camel becomes a constant companion, a metronome for the soul that matches the slow thrum of your own heart. With every synchronized step, the beast's heavy, padded feet meet the softening earth, sending a dull, rhythmic vibration up through the wooden frame of the saddle and into the base of your spine. It is a motion that demands nothing of you but surrender. You find yourself leaning into the tilt, swaying forward and back, until the boundary between your body and the animal begins to blur. The creak of the leather harness and the soft clink of the bronze bells around the camel's neck form a private melody, a song of the road that has been sung for 1,000 years by men of your blood. You do not look back immediately, for the path ahead requires your eyes to adjust to the glare of the melting snow. But eventually, as the trail rounds a jagged limestone spur, you pull gently on the lead and turn your head. Behind you, the caravanserai is already losing its sharp edges. The high, mud-brick walls that sheltered you through the howling gales of January now look like nothing more than a child's toy left behind in the vastness of the gorge. A thin veil of mountain mist, white and gossamer thin, begins to coil around the watchtowers, softening their silhouette until they seem to dissolve into the grey-blue shadows of the peaks. The place that was your entire world for 3 long months is becoming a ghost, a memory fading into the geography of the high passes. You feel a strange, quiet gratitude for those walls, but you do not mourn them. A Sogdian is not made for walls. You are made for the space between them. As the fortress disappears entirely behind a curtain of cloud, a profound sense of peace settles over you, heavier and more comforting than your thickest wool cloak. You are back in the flow, The Silk Road is not merely a track on a map, but a living river of silk, spice, glass, and ideas, and you have finally rejoined its current. The isolation of the winter, which at times felt like a stagnant pool, is washed away by the momentum of the caravan. You think of the letters in your satchel, the contracts signed in ink made of soot and glue, and the heavy bales of raw silk that carry the hopes of your family in Samarkand. There is a beautiful continuity in this movement. You are a single bead on a string that stretches from the sunrise to the sunset, connected to the merchants who passed this way a century ago, and those who will follow long after your name is forgotten. The air here is thinner and sharper than it was in the valley, tasting of wet stone and the first faint hints of alpine grass. You pull a handful of dried apricots from your pouch, the fruit tough and sweet, tasting of a summer sun that feels very far away. As you chew slowly, you watch the way the light plays across the distant ridges. The world is opening up, expanding with every mile, revealing hidden valleys where the ice is turning to rushing turquoise water. You realize that the long wait of the winter was not lost time, but a gathering of strength. Like the seeds beneath the snow, you were simply waiting for the right moment to break through the surface. The stillness was necessary so that the movement could feel this sweet. Your mind wanders to the cycle of it all, the eternal loop of travel and rest, of departure and arrival. This is the enduring spirit of your people. You are the bridge builders, the translators, the ones who carry the light of one civilization to the hearth of another. To be a Sogdian is to be comfortable in the transition, to find a home in the motion itself rather than the destination. You look down at your hands, calloused and dark from the sun and the rains, and you see the hands of your father and his father before him. They too felt this same swaying, heard this same wind whistling through the high crags, and felt this same quiet exhilaration at the start of a new season. The sun climbs higher, though it remains a pale, cool disk in the expansive sky. The shadows of the caravan stretch out long and thin across the path, like dark fingers pointing the way toward the eastern markets. You adjust your seat, feeling the warmth of the camel's body through the layers of rugs, and let your eyes half close. There is no need for haste. The road will give you what it will, in its own time. For now it is enough to be moving. It is enough to hear the rhythmic crunch of hooves on gravel and the distant, lonely cry of a hawk circling the heights. The world is vast. The mountains are ancient, and you are exactly where you are meant to be. As the afternoon begins to mellow into a soft, golden hue, the fatigue of the first day's travel starts to settle into your muscles. But it is a good ache, a tired body and a quiet mind. You find yourself drifting into a state of waking sleep, where the landscape flows past like a slow-moving dream. The peaks rise and fall in a silent procession of white and purple. You think of the warm fires that await you at the next small camp, the smell of boiling tea, and the soft rustle of the wind against the felt of the tents. But those are thoughts for later. For now, there is only the sway, the gentle, unending sway. You are a traveller, once more, a speck of life in the grand tapestry of the mountains, drifting forward into the horizon, guided by the stars and the steady heartbeat of the road. The path winds onward, disappearing into the soft blue distance where the earth meets the sky. You breathe out a long, slow breath, watching the mist of your exhaled air vanish into the clear morning. You are moving, you are free, and the road, as it always has, welcomes you home.